Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Grow Fall Sessions. My name is Luke Knight. I'm on the pastoral team at Living Waters Church. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Tonight, we're going to be talking about rest and the pandemic. Our Grow Sessions are designed for us to have healthy conversation within community during a season where we're a little bit spread apart and trying to find ways to stick together. And over the past few weeks in the fall, we have been discussing the idea and the importance of health. We've talked about mental health and physical health. And as we find ourselves in the middle of the fall, we felt it would be really important to speak about rest and the pandemic. And so I'm really excited to have Mike and Val Wilkinson joining us tonight to speak about rest and the pandemic. And we're going to get into that topic in just a moment, but welcome you two. So glad that you can join us tonight. We've known each other for, it's got to be what, 15, 16 years now?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but for those that may not know you, I mean, you've been a part of Living Waters for some time, and you've lived in Langley now for what, a good almost 20 years, a bit longer?
About 16 years, actually. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Maybe share a little bit about who you are, what you get up to, what your family looks like, and your favorite kind of coffee.
Wow. Any coffee that's fresh and hot is good for me.
Anything made by someone else.
She does not drink coffee though, so
Okay.
she's the tea drinker.
Oh, I see. Well, you can answer that around tea as well. Yeah. But yeah, over to you guys. Tell us about yourself.
You want to start?
Sure. So I'm Val. And okay, well, it's hard. Wow, to put it in like the nutshell of who I am. I guess one of my greatest joys is I'm a mom. So some of you that are part of the Living Waters connection may know some of my kids. Victoria is our oldest daughter. We have a son, Ethan, and then our baby is Grace, who's 19. So we are in a stage of life with no kids at home currently, which has been a new stage for us after having a very busy household with lots of kids around for many years. I'm also a public health nurse. And work full-time in Langley, but during the pandemic have been redeployed to work on COVID stuff. So that has been my life for the last number of months, everything COVID. So that's kind of my work stuff. I'll let Mike tell you, he'll probably mention our one place that we love to be is up at the lake at our cabin, and I'm sure he'll kind of throw that in of one of our favorite places to go.
Am I supposed to talk about the cabin?
I don't know.
Well, I'm Mike Wilkinson, and I am a professor of sociology at Trinity Western University, and during the pandemic have been asked to stay at home, like a lot of people who are finding that their work life is turned upside down. And in some cases, family life, if families are separated across borders, that may be, a big change and that's going on in people's lives as well. And so we're all adapting and adjusting and trying to find some normalcy to life. I know people don't like to hear that word anymore because they're not sure what normal is. But yeah, and so I'm working from home and doing my teaching and research, working with students. I've been at Trinity for about 16 years. And so that's a lot of my work. Any research traveling that I've done is not happening right now. So any kinds of team meetings and conferences and stuff is all online. So so kind of adjusting and adapting to all of these things as well. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us tonight. And I Mike, you said any kind of coffee, as long as it's fresh and hot, would be what you're into.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably a good place to start, fresh and hot.
Okay. But Val, you're the tea drinker. So what's your favorite cup of tea?
I drink black tea. So anything I don't drink coffee, but then people think that I'm, very healthy and avoid caffeine, but that's not true. I do need my caffeine. So I drink a lot of tea, but it's usually black tea with milk. But yeah, I go through quite a few cups of tea in a workday for sure.
Well done, you. Well, we're going to talk about rest in just a moment, but I think I'd be remiss if we didn't take just a moment to say, Mike, thanks for staying at home. But but Val, just on behalf of our community, as one of a few public health nurses in the Living Waters community, from our community, I know people would want to say thank you. Thank you for everything you've been up to for the last 8 months, and just the long hours and the incredible amount of effort. And we're not sure how many thanks you people get. It's kind of hard to know a little bit, but I think we want to say, on behalf of everybody on our pastoral team and council and those who are watching, thank you so much for what you're doing and how you're sacrificing and how you're leading in this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Some days we get more thanks than others, but
yeah, absolutely.
Other days it's not thanks.
yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. So in such a strange time, during this pandemic, we're now so many months into it. Who knows how long we're going to continue to be in this? And it's not as if when things do shift, someone's going to flip a switch and everything changes back. There's going to be, slow progressive changes one way or the other. Our health is so important, and I know the two of you value emotional, physical, spiritual health in so many ways, and you've demonstrated that in your lives. And so in talking about rest tonight, maybe the first question I have for you to share from your own experiences, what has trying to find rest and resting looked like during the pandemic for you? And feel free to be brutally honest about that.
Are you gonna just
Well, sure. I think one of the difficult things, and maybe I'll just give it some context because it's personal, but I don't think it's just me or Val who's trying to figure out how do we find rest, and some people maybe even watching might be thinking, what is rest, and why, what does that even mean? I think the way in which our culture probably tends to think about it is leisure, and vacation. And it's like, if I can just stop working, then I can find, some, relaxation by getting on a plane and flying to Hawaii or flying to Mexico if they can afford it, or getting away somewhere, or it may be, so there's this sense like, if I can just get away from whatever I'm doing, then perhaps I can find that place where I can just relax and rest. And that's not always easy. And of course, we are, shaped by an entire leisure industry, and tourism and all kinds of ways in which we are being, told that we will find that rest and relaxation and be rejuvenated, and and it's just a flight away, or a car drive away. And I think the challenge of the pandemic is trying to find moments and space and place to experience some kind of relaxation or rejuvenation or rest when we can't cross the border, right? Or it may be that, your health, it's too dangerous to get on a plane and fly somewhere else. Or maybe you look and you think, do we want to take a risk, and will our health insurance cover us if we travel to Hawaii right now? So, someone's like, wow, it's a cheap flight to get to one of these places, but, what happens if I get sick in another country? And so this really creates a lot of issues for people, because in some ways they do or have been living, with some kind of, annual cycle of the holiday is coming, or the camping trip is coming, or the trip to Disneyland is coming, or any, and this is very much our sort of Canadian, view on things. I mean, how people view, relaxation or whatever can differ elsewhere around the world. And so, I think that's a big challenge for people, is just how do I find that, and I think what we really need to do is to find ways to have moments to relax every day, or to rest, or special, maybe, way. We're gonna have to rethink it, and it's really difficult because I'm getting these daily reports on, or on my, work activities, or monthly reports, how many hours I spent on the screen, and is it up or down or whatever. And I get this report and it's like, holy smokes, my time has gone up on the screen. This can't be good. No wonder I'm fatigued, and that's how people talk about it. I'm tired. If I can just get away, or I'm fatigued. If I can just get a break. And I think that's kind of where we are as a culture, and where we are in our communities and our neighborhoods. I hear people saying, oh, once we get through this, I'm going to plan a cruise, or I'm going to plan a trip, or we're going to take that camping trip down into Washington State, or we're going to go on that bike tour and, ride Baker, ride our bikes up, Mount Baker.
Really?
Not me.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I hear some people who like to ride bikes, not me. And, but it's like, I can't do it yet. And so, it's like you're delaying the rest and relaxation that you need, but we just actually may need it even more now, and delaying it may not be too helpful down the road. So it's, how do we find, when we are, not able to do the kinds of things that we used to do as easily before, not able to look forward to, the family trip or whatever, because of the various restrictions of the pandemic. So this is a real challenge, and it's not just for our church, but I think I read a study just recently saying people are fatigued, they're stressed. Psychologists are talking in all the shows too about how people are feeling individually and personally, and that's part of it. But then I think we have to ask, okay, then what can we do, not just as individuals, but maybe more broadly as communities or as organizations like churches, to maybe help people find ways to, incorporate or inject time and space to find leisure or activity, or things that they can do that jazzes them, renews their batteries, gets their energy up again, so that they don't feel like I just spent my whole day in front of a screen, working or teaching, or doing things that exhaust me. And I think that's the challenge, because you get up in the morning, you walk into the kitchen, you grab your hot and fresh coffee, and you walk downstairs into your office. It's all happening under the same roof, and it's not easy to sort of separate work from home, which was the place where in our daily way we could just sort of get away from work and relax and rest. So I think there are some real challenges for us now in our communities, our neighborhoods, our culture, and trying to sort this through. Yeah.
Val, what's your experience been like during the pandemic, finding rest?
I did laugh when I saw the topic that you were proposing that we discuss, because at the beginning of the pandemic, when so many things were closed down and people were forced to be home, and I know for a lot of people it was challenging because they were off work, and there were all those other real life challenges with kids being home and parents having to homeschool and jobs, people not being paid and all of that. But on the other hand, then people were like, I have so much time on my hands. I'm organizing all our family photos, and I've cleaned out all these closets, and I've, done all this stuff. And I'm like, I have never been so stressed and busy in my life, because I am working 24/7, so much overtime. Like even on my days off, I'm being called in, and it's like, no breaks at work. It was just full out. And so rest was kind of the farthest thing from my mind. When I came home from work, literally I fell into bed to get up to, like go again the next day. So it definitely, I did kind of smile when I sort of saw that topic, because I thought, okay, initially for me, the pandemic and rest seemed to be totally, not, sort of having any link. I have had to definitely find ways to do some self-care things and to find some ways to create some rest in my life. And I find that whole topic about rest something that I think I've probably wrestled with my whole maybe life, definitely my whole life as a mother. I feel like that balance between busyness and busyness being almost a badge of honor, to be able to say, I did this, this, and this, and this, and aren't I so amazing? And then also to be able to find that balance of being able to, say, it's okay for me to let some things go, and this time of creating some space to maybe not do, but just to more focus on the being part. So I think there's been some things that I have wrestled with, for a lot of my life. I feel like I've come to a new understanding, maybe now that I don't have any kids in home, but it took me that long. But definitely, I wouldn't initially have said that the pandemic has been specifically restful for me at this so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the challenge with that though too is like we think, oh, if I can just get to, this particular time when the pandemic is done, then I will find rest. But maybe we won't if we actually haven't figured it out, on a personal level of how do I incorporate some sense of rest in my life. Or the other way to ask the question is to do it this way. What is fatiguing me? What is tiring me out? And maybe going on a vacation won't fix that, because you just go away for a week and you come back and it's like you're still engaging in things that are fatiguing you. And I think that gets down to, as Val said, this sense of some well-being. How do I take care of myself? And sometimes that means saying no to certain activities because they might just be busyness when we're tired and need to rest. Or maybe it may mean that I have to make some priorities. And busyness and tiredness and being fatigued looks different at different stages of life. As Val's mentioned, when you've got young kids, that there's certain demands on you. You can't just say, take care of yourself. Mom and I are going on holidays. See you in a week, toddlers, right? Like you just can't do that. So
we shouldn't be doing that.
Where is your child? When I was growing up, there used to be this commercial that came on TV at 11 o'clock, and it said, or not a commercial, but it was sort of this
public
service announcement. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? It's kind of funny, but you think, you go through different stages of life where, kids demand different things from you, whether they're infants or toddlers or teenagers or adults. And so, you can't get rid of them, and you can't just, find a weak way as that's going to solve it. But it's really, we've had this conversation as well, like, yes, we love our kids. Our kids are really important to us. We would give anything to support and encourage our kids. But our relationship is really important. And if we don't find ways to connect and to talk through things and to, focus on what is important, then, we're always going to be fatigued and tired by, other things going on in life. So I think finding rest can mean different things. How do you find rest personally, right? As an individual, how do I find ways to relax or rest with a partner, where you share common things together and can share, times together of finding, relaxation and rest. But also being, I think with a community of friends is important too, where you don't feel like, oh, I don't want to get together because they're just going to tire me out. You know, it's also having healthy relationships and community where you're energized and you feel strengthened and you feel supported and you feel encouraged. So, you know, um, and that's difficult during a pandemic because we have to keep our bubbles very small, right? And so, you know what, we've been having, you know, believe it or not, I don't know how effective it is or not, but we sure have enjoyed connecting with some friends, you know, on Zoom. It's like, hey, let's get together Friday night and, you know, we'll have a time to just catch up. And because we miss you guys and we, you know, we're not able to see each other and never would have thought of doing that before. But maybe it's that one way of just trying to connect with people again as much as possible. Um, but I think that that's a big part of it in trying to figure out how do we incorporate regular practices in our lives that energize us, and give life to us as individuals and in relationship with another individual, but also in community with friends and family and peers. So those, I think, are important things.
You started to touch on there kind of the next question. Val, you said this sense of doing versus maybe this sense of being. And I think maybe some of us have heard the phrase before. It's a bit cliche, but it rings true. You know, we're human beings, we're not human doings. And so in thinking about being, and Mike, you just touched on the idea of ritual. I'd be curious to know what some of your rituals are, because I think one of the things that the Christian faith offers us is ritual, rooted in a story, of a rhythm. And Mike, you talked a little bit about that sense of, well, when all of this ends, then I'll take a break. Whereas some of the Christian tradition handed down to us is a sense that there is an inevitability of the onslaught of life. And in the midst of that, there's a ritual and a rhythm to pause and to stop and to be and to rest. And I wonder if you could share some of what those rituals are. You mentioned one now with friends, maybe on a Friday night kind of Zoom date, but what other rituals, be they weekly or daily or momentary even, that you've discovered have been helpful even during the pandemic or before the pandemic, that you've kind of brought into your life?
Well, I actually, Mike has, okay, I'll go back to, I have found that sort of having mantra sounds like the wrong word, but like a prayer that I basically just breathe. And so it can just be like a phrase. And I was going to say Mike was kind of one of the people that we had some discussions about some of that because of some of the readings that he had done about that sort of just concept of, you know, is that sometimes we think that we have to, you know, plan certain activities into our lives at certain times. And sometimes it's just as simple as breathing. And so I have found that whether I'm running or whether I found being out on the paddleboard, just with like having, you know, just that lake being totally like glass, like calm, that they're basically, you know, I just found sort of having, and I call it a prayer, but it basically, you know, it was basically just actually for me part of the 23rd Psalm, which is kind of, to me, seems funny because it's something that many of us have known as a child, and it's kind of like the Lord is my shepherd, you know, like we kind of have like gone through this, but it never really had any significance to me in the way that it has become meaningful to me in the last number of years. And the one part that actually is just part of often my running kind of breathing is just about he refreshes my soul. And
Right.
Basically the part before that talks about, you know, he leads me to green pastures. And then, you know, there's different paraphrases or different translations the way, but the one was that he brings me to either waters of rest or quiet waters. And so when I'm on the lake and that lake is just calm, like not a ripple, and the sun and the leaves and the mountains are reflecting into it, you know, think he leads me to quiet waters and he refreshes my soul. And that whole concept of like having my soul refreshed, like I feel like when I'm that bone exhausted and stressed and that level of anxiety, that I actually need more than, yes, I need a good night's sleep, but I do need something that's deeper. And so to me, it feels like I need my soul refreshed. And so that practice of just kind of having, and I think, saying it in my mind and just, acknowledging that has been like a good, meaningful thing for me, I found.
That's beautiful, because what you're playing with there is not just scripture, but is also really malleable language and metaphor, right? Like I imagine you on that lake, but maybe you've never done this, but I also imagine you with your teacup in a hurried break or a hurried moment, just looking down at water and going, okay, this water's calm. God, would you refresh me in this tiny moment? I know professionals that have long meetings, on Zoom all day, and all they have is 3 minutes between intense meetings. And one of the professionals I know, she gets up and has a pacing around the house there. She turns the kettle on. It takes 1.5 minutes to boil. She's able to put the tea. She has it down to like 1.5 minutes. And if she keeps to that cycle of repetition and ritual of rest, she finds herself rejuvenated even in that 3 minutes as they go each time through. And I love that you've found a phrase that you can take with you anywhere, and whether you feel relaxed or not, you can breathe that truth in a little bit. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, and I feel like it's I think, it wasn't something that I consciously was aware of before, because I think you think, if I'm going to, it has to be an intentional carving out of a specific allotment of time that you're going to do this particular activity that's either going to create rest, or, even I think in church circles, people talk about, I need to set aside this X number of time to get up and pray, or this, do this specific activity. And to me, it has become more of just a natural, it becomes a process of thought when you say it like that enough, that it doesn't have to be always like, I need 3 hours to do this. It's more of a constant, like breathing.
Yeah. Oh, that's profound. I have one of those prayers myself. I kind of took in the Eastern Orthodox Jesus prayer,
Yeah.
Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And it's funny, if you say that 10, 15, 20, 30, 100 times, if you really need to, something does happen through that rhythm and that invitation to be more open to God in that moment. What about you, Mike? What kind of rituals do you?
Well, now that you mention it, I mean, there are traditions within Christianity that have a different approach to reading the Bible, for example, or to practicing their spirituality, like in Eastern Orthodoxy, as you mentioned. And as Val mentioned, there's various practices and things that I've been thinking about in interaction with a friend who was a spiritual director when we lived in Calgary years ago, that got me on a different path and thinking about spirituality. And I think Christianity is something that can offer us something about rest. I mean, the sort of word that was used, the old word that was used, was Sabbath, but people who've grown up in maybe a more strict Christian tradition, I listen to them talk sometimes about it, and it's like, oh, Sunday, that was the Sabbath. We were not allowed to do this, and we were not allowed to do that, and we're not allowed to do it. It was like, what was built around it was everything that you couldn't do. There was nothing that was sort of expressed as, wow, you are free for a whole day to not work. Yeah. Like, you can enjoy this day. Yeah. But it was like, no swimming, you have to do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. And so I think people reacted to it in a way and didn't realize that actually Sabbath is the practice of rest. Yeah. And it means that I can be free from other things that fatigue me. Yeah. And So, there are traditions within Christianity, like Eastern Orthodox, that read the Bible differently than, the way in which some Protestant Christians have, which is to read it in a way that, may focus on, well, I need to read this because in reading it, I'm going to come up with the 5 proofs for the existence of God, and then I can show them,
Right.
I really have the truth, Whereas the Eastern Orthodox tradition is, you don't read the Bible to sort of prove anything to anybody. You read the Bible prayerfully so that it transforms you, but some people are so concerned about, fixing other people, and there goes my dog. Can you hear him
I think
barking?
the dogs are saying amen in dog language. Amen. Keep going.
Some days there's not a lot of rest around here when you have that going on.
All good. If it's not your dog, it's going to be my daughter.
Oh, well, there, yeah.
So, people have these ideas, but that somehow they have to, the Bible becomes the book to prove to everyone that you've got the truth and they don't, or it becomes the book that they read to fix other people, or but the Eastern Orthodox tradition of reading it prayerfully, meditatively, reflectively, the technical term they use is Lectio Divina, but it's this idea that you're not reading it quickly, like, I can read the whole Bible in a year. Hey, and then I did it twice, It's like, no, read it slowly. Okay, so how do you read it slowly? Well, here's what you do. And I'll just share a quick story then. I spent about, I don't even know how long, but just reading one story, the same story over and over again. Jesus' first miracle of turning water into wine. And it was like that. And the purpose from the Eastern Orthodox tradition in reading it is that read it enough to let it just indwell you and change you and transform you. And so when you live with even a small portion of scripture, over time, it can transform you. It can, as you read it prayerfully, you're saying, God, what are you saying to me through this? How can I find, you in this? How are you speaking to my very soul? And in doing so, then you find that scripture also sustains you through the times that you're tired. So in the time that I spent just reflecting upon that passage, there were things in it that God spoke to me about provision, right? So they show up at the wedding, and I mean, what's the worst thing? You got 100 guests and only 50 plates of food. That could be very embarrassing. It's like, who made the mistake here? We don't have enough. Well, they ran out of wine at this wedding. And so the question was, well, what are we going to do now? And, the miracle is the turning of water into wine. But the real miracle is the provision comes at just the right time. No one is embarrassed. No one is shamed. Right. And so through all of this, I'm thinking, and God is speaking deeply into my heart about, I will provide. Now, we always don't know what provision is. We may have certain ideas of what provision is, and we think, I know what the provision is. God's going to give me $1 million. Maybe not. Maybe he's just going to give you grace through this, a terribly difficult time in your life. But it's provision. And so, if I just read over that quickly and moved on and didn't stop and reflect and say, how can this transform me to trust God? Because that's really what it comes down to, is I don't trust God that I can find rest in him or provision, from God for what I need. So if God knows I need rest, can I not trust him to help me find rest? And anyways, there's lots of things in there that, over a period of 20 years, I go back to, and there are other texts that I read slowly. I don't read the Bible through in a year or a week or whatever people try to do fast. It's kind of like this, whole slow movement. We're going to have the slow food movement. And now there's a book out on the slow professor, and, and so, well, maybe we need to have a slow spirituality. But the problem is everybody wants their lives to change tonight. Like, I don't want to have this anymore. But really, the Christian tradition is one that is asking us to trust God through a lifelong process that may at times be very slow. And but really it's it's trusting that God does want us to come to some understanding of what it means to be fully human, because that's what God created us as human beings. So what does it really mean to be, created by a God as a human being and to be fully human?
Yeah.
And loved by God through all of that. So, so there's some theological ideas there too, I think, that we can reflect upon as it relates to rest. But traditionally it's been Sabbath, but I think people have too many bad memories of what, Sunday, you can't do this and you can't do that.
Yeah.
Finding new patterns. And so for me, it's reading the Bible differently than I did. It's walking, it's trying to breathe, and not just when my watch says breathe, Michael. And some days it goes off quite a lot. I said to my daughter the first time, I went, why does this thing keep telling me to breathe? And she goes, Dad, it's following your heartbeat right now, and it must be going up. So it's like, okay, I got to breathe. So breathing is important, and paying attention to even how our bodies are responding to what's going on. It's like, my body is telling me something's not right here. It's like my back is hurting, or I'm stressed out, or I'm, my heart rate is going up. I need to rest. I need to breathe. I need to go for a walk. And so those are things we can do for well-being, but I think it's more than just physical well-being. I think the reason we're not sometimes physically well, not always, but sometimes it's because we are afraid and we don't trust, and God calls us into a trusting, loving relationship where we are accepted just as we are, and we can find peace with the Creator that way.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on there in terms of what the Christian tradition can offer our society even right now is so good, but we often get it so backwards. Much of our Christian tradition, at least it can feel in some evangelical streams, has been more shaped by society in terms of the quick fixes and what we're selling and all that kind of stuff, rather than what goes against the grain so much of what we're experiencing in our Christian tradition, in terms of that sense of slowness and taking time and the sacredness of doing that. And that, to me, is what's so compelling about Jesus, and what's so compelling about the scriptures is I feel like I'm living in such a time right now that has so much, that scripture in Christ has so much to say to what our society needs right now, that my neighbors need, what I need. And a lot of that has to do with time taking. I mean, when we talk about Sabbath, even though I agree many people would hear it as a dirty word, if we really were able to, again, reclaim and re-understand what Sabbath is, how good would that be for people to go, well, Sabbath means that email stops on a Friday night and doesn't get picked up again for 24 hours. Sabbath means that when I work, and when I don't work, I don't work, if we're able to do that. And yet we live in a society now that I think even, 10, 15 years ago, people weren't where we are now, where people couldn't imagine their life where they're not on, when they're not always being asked to be on. So there's a lot in the Christian tradition, I think, that is available for us to search deeper and to ask who is God shaping us to be, and what are these probably more ancient rhythms and traditions that we need to reclaim and re-understand, especially as they relate to our bodies. And that's what we talked a little bit about with both Matt Vlasic, who's a mental health specialist, and with Monica Rosenke, a physical health specialist. We talked about our connection to our bodies as Christians, and how we so often live disembodied rather than embodied. And I just finished a great book from a scholar named Paula Gooder. I think right now she's canon at St. Paul's Cathedral. She's a New Testament scholar specializing in Paul. And she just wrote a great little book a couple of years ago called Bodied: Biblical Spirituality for the Whole Person. And basically going, we've completely misunderstood Paul, we've misunderstood the New Testament. What really we mean, if we actually take the resurrection of Jesus seriously, then we need to take our bodies much more seriously. So I'm curious, as your watch is helping you take your body more seriously, and I don't know how I feel about that theologically, if the machine is dictating the man, whatever that means, but for the two of you in the pandemic, how have you learned to prayerfully listen to your bodies and listen to God as people full of the Spirit and expecting to live an embodied life? What sorts of things have you been doing to stay healthy, and how does that connect with rest for you?
I think, something that's been a gift for us is just being able to physically away, and we do have a place that we're able to escape to that's a couple hours away on a lake. And I think that physical removing of ourselves from home, which is work for Mike, but then just getting out of town, has allowed us to one, physically, just have that reprieve mentally. You get there and you just kind of, have that, you're able to breathe, you're able to take, but I think then we're outside, we're in nature. And I think that, that refocuses you on who God is when you're looking up at the sky and you're seeing like literally a gazillion stars that you don't even know exist because we don't see them with the lights of the city, and those type of things. I think that you really your perspective changes, and I think for me that's a lot of for a lot of people, they may not have a place that they physically can go, but what can you do that changes your perspective so that, whether it is even just getting outside, going for a walk locally where, we live, which we do often, a dog does force you to get outside. But sometimes just, looking up, I think, getting out, changing your perspective. It's very easy when you're feeling bombarded and feeling overwhelmed and feeling exhausted to turn in and, just think, okay, I shouldn't generalize. I think maybe everyone else doesn't do it, but sometimes when I get feeling that way, I start to also think, oh, it's only me. I'm the one that's, no, I must be the most tired. I must be the most overworked. I must be the one with, whatever. And I know that that's not true. As soon as I am able to get, my eyes off me and sort of look up and look out, then I find that my perspective changes, and that allows me then to definitely, look at things a lot differently.
That makes sense.
In many ways, we're really fortunate living in the Lower Mainland because there are so many places that you can go for hikes and walks and reconnect with yourself or reconnect with people. And I think there is something about being outside and part of nature creation where you can get some perspective. And so I mean, walking a lot is helpful, and but it is finding that it's making a priority, really. Like what's important to me, and is taking care of my health, taking care of listening to my body, thinking about my who I am as a whole being, how I think, how I feel, the kinds of things that I'm doing. Am I doing things that are not, they're just fatiguing me more? Am I thinking about and engaging in ideas that are fatiguing? Like it's just really, it's like whatever's fatiguing you, just stop it. I mean, in some ways, but I know, and I don't say that. I mean, I have to tell myself that because I'm always, finding myself tired as well. And then I'm like, no wonder my body is not feeling very good. I haven't been paying attention. So these are just little reminders, and I'm not speaking as if I've figured it all out. I'm on the journey too, and as someone who's on the journey, I'm really thankful for friends and community and a partner that values and appreciates these things as well, and we can talk about them and try to encourage one another to be taking time for rest and being good to ourselves, right? Being kind to ourselves and not getting too hard on ourselves as well when we feel like, well, I haven't done the 6 things I was supposed to do to get rest this week. And, and then we add that on as more sort of, weight to ourselves, in our own minds. And that's not the purpose at all. It's simply to say, look at it. all of us are on a journey in life to becoming hopefully more human. And in doing so, we're all just trying to find ways to encourage one another and support one another towards um, a greater appreciation of who we are as human beings, but also that within Christianity, there are all kinds of resources as well that can nurture our lives and support us and strengthen us. And so to me, that's sort of the underlying theme of how to find rest, whether you're in a pandemic or not.
Yeah, yeah. It strikes me, and I've been spending a good amount of time thinking about the upcoming season, which for some people is in the front of their minds, many not. But as we move towards December into Advent and then into the Christmas season, I'm expecting that it's going to hit a lot of people in a difficult way. I know that pastorally already, it can be such a challenging time for so many, but I think it's going to surprise a lot of people with what we may be grieving or losing in Advent and at Christmas. But I know that Advent is a special season for you, and as we think about moving towards that season and what we might wait on God for and receive from God in that time, I wonder if you've had any thoughts yet about that upcoming season and how you're going to intentionally invite God in and intentionally experience some rest and what that looks like. And maybe you don't, or maybe we can spitball some ideas now, but I just wondered about that, because I think it's an opportunity for us in this very unique Advent and very unique Christmas to maybe learn more about the season and what it really means in a way. Have you had any thoughts about that yet as you think towards that time?
I have been putting some thought into that, and I think maybe because I have a little bit more realistic a picture of what Christmas may look for us, being aware of the numbers of cases and some of those things that, I think realistically things are definitely not going to be back to what we consider normal by Christmas. They keep saying, if we our public health message obviously is we want people to follow the guidelines now. So hopefully our numbers do decrease, but the reality is that probably we're definitely still going to be in a pandemic at Christmas time. And so, the one gift that I really have found during the pandemic, and I think, it looks different for everyone. I definitely, my heart goes out to those young families at home that are trying to juggle working from home and homeschooling and, all the different things that are, happening with even having kids in school and online and some of that stuff. I just can't even imagine having to balance all of that. So my heart definitely goes out to that. But, the one gift that I have heard many times from many of the different clients that I've talked to with doing the contact tracing is the gift of time that we have been given in some ways. And I remember calling this one older couple, and I'm like, so, you're going to need to isolate until this date. And he's like, this is great. I'm having a great time. We're playing cards all the time. And this is awesome. And I had to chuckle because obviously that's not the response I get from everyone when I'm telling them that they have to isolate. Yeah. But I think, if we can somehow, in all of the extra layers that the pandemic has added to many of our lives, find that gift of time. I'm saying that word, but there's many things that we're not going to be able to do, or that are going to look different. And so with those restrictions that are taking some things away, how then, with that time that has been opened up, can we experience some, I think for some of us is finding ways to just be together. And it may not be physically for some of our families if we have extended family that aren't able to travel, or we have seniors that are in our lives that it may not be safe to be in person, seeing, but how can we experience that gift of time with being together? And so I think, sometimes with heading into the Advent season, there's always that for us, that anticipation, and we have practiced with our family of being very intentional, of sort of going through the season of Advent, and rather than it just being one day on the 25th, kind of, that whole season of leading up to Advent and Christmas. And sort of, I think that speaks to, again, that process of slowing it down to day by day, slowing it down to pieces, rather than everything being this big hurrah, everything being this big. So how can we take those little pieces of gifts of time that we may some days forget that we have, because we feel so overwhelmed with all these other layers the pandemic has been given. But in reality, there's probably some things you're doing that you're not doing that you used to do pre-pandemic, 100 activities in the evenings that maybe you were running out to or doing. And so how do we kind of use that gift of time is something that's kind of been sort of ruminating around with me, and especially leading into Advent season, of how I can make that.
Maybe we're just coming around to sort of even thinking about this time as a gift. When the pandemic first started, we were like, I can get through this. I'm going to binge watch Netflix. And then that was me. I was just like, and then after 2 or 3 series, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not working. And then it's like, after everybody did their binge watching, then it was like, I'm going to shop online, and it's just like, everybody's just shopping like crazy. And there are trucks going by our street every day from every courier service that you could think of, dropping off packages at every door. It's kind of like, well, we can only do that for so long. Yeah. And okay, now what are we going to do? Right. And so maybe Advent is a way in which churches can, connect with the culture again to say, what, this is a gift of time. This is a gift for us. What does it mean for us to receive a gift? And maybe that's a good way of putting it. I'm just reflecting upon it as Val's talked about it and you've asked the question, but it is interesting to see how we have responded, over the last number of months to this time, from binge watching to shopping to whatever we may be doing to try to make the time go faster, but we can't make the time go faster. So how we come to terms with this time that we have will be very interesting, but maybe Advent is a good way to remind us that it is a gift. And so if it's a gift, what do we do with that gift?
Yeah, well said. And if Advent is a time of waiting and longing, as the shopping trucks and Amazon packages fly by, asking ourselves the question, what are we really waiting and longing for? And where are we placing our waiting and our longing and our hoping? And I think that's why in wisdom, the church traditions do slow us down for those times of fasting and then feasting, so that we can really ruminate and consider deeply and then celebrate together at the same time. And Thanksgiving hands that to us a little bit. I think that Advent coming as well, though, is. And I think that I like what you said about there may be things that we're already doing that give us life, and how can we just lean into those a little bit more? There's something to that. And I think we're probably speaking of time, towards the end of our time now, but I love the direction of the conversation and what we've been able to discover a little bit together. We could probably have 10 more of these conversations and get deeper and deeper. But hopefully it sparks some imagination for people and affirms some stuff and maybe, inspires us a little bit as well. But I wonder, as we close, if if there's anything that you'd like to say to people who are watching this, anything that you'd like to bless them with, a thought, an idea, an encouragement, a challenge, anything that you would say, this is what I hope people would hear from the Wilkinson family tonight, in terms of the kinds of stuff that we've been talking about. What do you want to leave with people?
Now the pressure's on to say something very profound.
No, it might not be all that profound at all.
I like I mentioned at the beginning, I think I think this whole concept of rest has been something that I've always struggled with. And I think for a lot of it for me was because when I was resting, I wasn't specifically doing anything, I felt like. And so I think, especially for moms, recognizing that resting is doing something, and it's something that's very healthy and beneficial. And if you don't refresh yourself, then you don't have anything to give out. And so really, taking that time to find rest, however it is doesn't mean you're not doing anything. It really actually probably is one of the most important things that you actually can do. So giving yourself permission to do that, I think has been a really important life lesson I've had to learn. That's
so bang on. That is deeply profound, Val, and I can resonate with that. I remember 2 years ago when I had my pastoral sabbatical, the first couple of weeks, Sarah would come home from work and she'd say, "Oh, how was your day?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I did this and I did that and I did the other." And you don't have to justify your day. The point is that you're resting. And it took me a good 3-4 weeks to really even find that kind of rhythm and be like, oh, I didn't do anything. And that's entirely the point. But that's a lifelong journey, I think, as you mentioned, in different stages that we find ourselves in, because we have to recalibrate to those new stages. Yeah. Mike, what would you want to say to people?
If it's a fresh, hot cup of coffee, enjoy it. Be kind.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, thanks, you two. I wonder, we don't normally do this, but I just sense maybe this is the thing to do. If one of you would be willing to just pray over people who are watching and pray a blessing and life into people as we close. Would you be willing to do that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, God, that you have created us. You created us as beings that are made in your image, and that you love us intensely. And God, I just pray right now that whatever circumstance or situation that people find themselves in during this time of increased stress and anxiety, that you would just show yourself as the God who comforts us, the God that walks beside us, the God that loves us intensely. And that you would allow us to just feel like we are led to quiet waters of rest, that we would know what it means to have our souls refreshed. Mm-hmm. Just pray that you would just speak that to the people that need to hear that you do refresh our souls. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, you two, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.